On this video, let's talk about instant connections, rushing relationships, and love bombing ourselves. I'm Alan Robarge, an attachment-focused psychotherapist and a relationship educator, and I like to talk about how to heal attachment injuries and improve our relationships. And this video is about love bombing. It's about rushing into a relationship, almost creating an instant relationship, feeling an incredibly strong, close connection. Usually happens in the early stages of meeting someone, and we might call it even the beginning of the honeymoon period. It's the initial first so many weeks, first so many months of meeting a new person, and it's just a lot of excitement and a lot of anticipating seeing the person again, being flooded with new feelings, being really swept off your feet. And perhaps you just love this feeling of being swept off your feet, and you want to have a romantic whirlwind experience. And you might even believe in the romantic narrative, this cultural idea that when we meet someone, we are transported into a different level of excitement and bliss and affection and closeness and warmth. And you'll find when this happens, we say things like, oh, I just feel like I've known you my whole life. And I feel like I don't even have to explain myself. It's like we just know each other. And what we want to do is, if we have gone for some time with not having this kind of connection, and even if time hasn't passed, we have an assumption that to be completely flooded with this hormonal cocktail of excitement and closeness and affection, and to feel that strong, strong attraction, that we want to continue it, that we want to play it out, we want to exaggerate it, amplify it, and create it as much as we can. However, this particular video is going to talk about that we might be doing that in such a way that is a distraction or a cover-up for other things that are going on for us. And we very much see this new possibility of a relationship as a savior, as a new beginning, as a way to move away from the regular routine of our everyday life, which feels flat, which feels stale, if perhaps we have a lackluster experience of living day to day, not a lot of excitement, and we are lonely, and we don't have that much love in our life. And we have invested in this story, this romantic narrative, that when we meet this person and we all get essentially drunk off of each other, and we want to keep it going and appear to invest, to be available, to invest in a future, and to start saying things like, oh, well, maybe we could go on vacation here in a month and a half, or how about next summer we might consider, going to the beach. And we speak as if we are closer to this person than we actually are. And if this is happening, chances are the other person is doing the same thing. This would include sharing terms of endearment, revealing, I care about you. Might even go as far very early on to say, I love you, when there's no foundation. You don't even have a friendship. You don't even have a foundation of time. Enough time has not passed. And I'm a big fan of the word stranger. I think it's just really, really helpful. And this is very applicable to those of us with attachment injuries, attachment wounds that show up as the symptoms of trauma. And when we're living with attachment trauma, that oftentimes includes distorting reality, not seeing things clearly, which means we would ignore red flags. And it also means that we have this ability to be in relationship with people who are not really there. We have a history, probably in our families. It comes historically from childhood, doesn't have to, but in general, there is an interruption in the bonding process. There's an interruption, there were breaks in the attachment bond in such a way that created a distress in the nervous system and even impeded or got in the way of our development, specifically around relational needs not being met, emotional needs not being met, and also forfeiting the ability to practice maturing in those areas. So attachment trauma is oftentimes framed as a developmental trauma, that if we think in terms of all the stages of development, it's as if the image is like Swiss cheese. There's different holes that we got some connection. We got some affirmation of who we are and our sense of self. We got some exchange of warmth and closeness. And we did experience an attachment bond, but it was interrupted in certain ways. So that's what we mean developmentally, this visual of like Swiss cheese. There's sort of some things missing. And if we prize this romantic relationship as really being something that is going to make our life better and better and better, and this is something that is going to finally get the love that we deserve, finally have that relationship that's going to allow us to build a life. And many of us, we also, in this whole romantic narrative business, we've really fallen into the story of the forever, this forever relationship, the one, and we just think that we're so on board with wanting to be chosen and find a relationship that we can experience as having a sense of permanence and a relationship where we feel that we are a priority. And this is going to be ultimately, if it's sustainable, ultimately, if it has a foundation, ultimately, if it's good, it could serve as a corrective experience for our history around attachment wounding, and could also help us practice new skills of relating to create earned, secure attachment if we fall within the spectrum of insecure attachment behaviors. So love bombing is a word, a phrase that is oftentimes talked about related to the abuse cycle. And it very much is used in the context of manipulation. It is a manipulation tactic. And it comes from a source of ill intent. There's a maliciousness, wanting to create control. And again, this abuse cycle, it's really trying to have power over, undermine the other person, and confuse them with extreme behaviors of closeness, affection, love, availability, in such a way that convinces very quickly the person who's on the receiving end that this is going great, this is wonderful. And many of us, especially those of us with attachment injuries, we don't really have a lot of experience of people who are really, sincerely interested in knowing us, in pursuing us, in giving us encouragement, letting us know that we have worth and we matter, and they're really thinking of us, and they're sweet, and they do nice things, and there's this sense of surprise and just feeling that they're generous and that they're supportive. So I make that distinction about love bombing because I'm not using it in that context of a tactic of manipulation. And I'm not using it in the context of trying to observe the behaviors of others and their ill intent and how they're trying to hurt us and trying to be on guard and be suspicious. Instead, what we're doing is we're turning the lens on ourselves, we're turning on the spotlight, and we're going to think about, not in the sense of a malicious behavior, not coming from and or even remotely related to an abuse cycle, but how in fact we engage in these behaviors ourselves. Maybe in a way we're love bombing the other person, but we're ultimately doing it to love bomb ourselves because we want the bliss, the excitement, the warmth, the constant affection that in our everyday life, prior to meeting this new exciting person, we don't have enough of. Now, this also is going to now cross over into a kind of origin or context of where this might be coming from. And we can introduce the concept of love addiction in the sense of a compulsion or a process addiction, where we are softening our boundaries, we're lessening control, we're giving up monitoring our caution, monitoring what is safe for us, and we're allowing ourselves to go way beyond our comfort zone of vulnerability and a rushed, if not even a forced intimacy. So when we lessen that control on a regular basis, and we mix it also with this sense of compulsion. It's a seeking. It's a persistent, constant seeking of being available, of calling, of wanting to show up together, wanting to hang out together, wanting to keep letting the other person know, that how you feel about them. And what it's doing for you is activating this sense of great excitement. And so you're getting a hormonal bump. You're actually creating a sense of activation in your nervous system. And this is really hard stuff to talk about because, well, isn't that what everyone has been doing since the beginning of time? When you meet like the really wonderful new person in your life, and you very much do have this feeling of like, I'd really like to see them. I'd really like to max out seeing them. And there's this, not for everybody, but sometimes there's this feeling of, well, why hold back? I've waited so long. Let's not hold back. Let's just completely jump in. The challenge, the problem here is that what happens is we're throwing caution to the wind. And those of us who have this history of attachment, wounding, we can distort reality, which means ignoring red flags and not seeing things clearly. And when I'm talking here about love bombing ourselves, what it means, we don't want to see things clearly. And there's different reasons of why we're doing this. What I would consider the number one reason and something to really look at is we ultimately, on a very deep level, if we're honest with ourselves, and love bombing ourselves is about not being honest. It has an aspect of dishonesty because there's no foundation to know each other. There's no history. I mean, the truth is we're strangers. You met a stranger and now you're behaving as if you're not strangers. There's an inherent dissonance in this. Like there's parts of our brain that this does not make sense. Why are we behaving in this incredibly intimate, vulnerable way? And our response, the answer is, well, that's what you do when you fall in love and you just allow yourself to completely engage and be really, really open with a person that you do not know and they do not know you. And you show up as if you're just completely available and that you're encouraging and that you're generous and that you're demonstrative and that you're emotionally available. And many of us go through this love bombing experience where, yes, we're probably love bombing the other person, but we're ultimately love bombing ourselves because we don't want to admit that we're frightened and fearful of this kind of intense intimacy and vulnerability. And on a deeper level, we really don't think it's going to last. It's a bit of self-sabotage. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. our wounding, and this isn't, your wounding could be different. There could be different levels and flavors, and but in general, our wounding incorporates some core beliefs that says relationships don't really work out for us, and that we don't matter, we're not good enough, we're not lovable, and if someone really got to know us, they would leave. And we have this history, not perhaps all of, this, to be rejected, to be abandoned, to be betrayed. And so maybe not all of those, for some, yes, it's all of those. But this fear that, based upon our history of relationships not working out, and based upon how we are shielding and guarding ourselves from actually a true intimacy, this love-bombing behavior where we're essentially distracting ourselves with this intensity so that we don't see any of the red flags or the flaws or the concerns, or even let in the ordinary aspect of meeting someone, and that they're not amazing and special, they're just a human being. And you do not need to present yourself as amazing and special because you also are ordinary and just a human being. And we really struggle to be able to reveal and share our everyday, lackluster ordinariness, because we are constantly trying to overcompensate and be more. And we want life to be more. And in order, we have to prove the wounding wrong. We have to prove that we are lovable. We do deserve love. We are going to receive the attention that was denied us in the past. And so we kind of play this game with ourselves that says, I'm going to try to milk this for as much as I can and really feel this rapture of intense closeness, because ultimately I believe it's going to go away. And ultimately, I don't think that the person that I'm meeting is really available, will really want to be with me, will really see me, will really love me. And so I gotta get as much as I can, as fast as I can, before this thing goes away. And that means that we're operating in that scenario. What I'm talking about, that's not intimacy. That's not an authentic intimacy. It's a very calculated pseudo intimacy, where we are performing at being available, and performing at being close, and performing at falling in love quickly. And why is it a performance? Because we're strangers. We don't know each other at all. There's no real context. So that what we're falling in love with, if you're going to push back on this as I share this, go, no, it's real. It's just, I'm falling in love. Well, we know that it has nothing to do with the other person. We're projecting. In the very, very early stages, when we don't know each other, we're all strangers, we're all on our best behavior, we're appearing to have much more heightened skill of emotional availability than we actually do. And I'm not just talking about us, I'm talking about, the person we're with as well, is that we're just trying to show our better side. And in the process of doing that, it's that pseudo intimacy that we are exaggerating. And over time, it's going to fall away. That in the early stages, there's this projection that we can't really love the other person. We don't know the person at all. They're a complete stranger. And we can have aspiration to love them. We can have a kind of general empathy for them as a human being. we can feel the warmth of love, but we still have to remind ourselves there's no context for the depth of feeling that we're assigning and the meaning that we're assigning to the depth of feeling, because it's not merited. So what we're essentially doing is we're falling in love with our own projection. We're falling in love with this activation, this hormonal cocktail, this intense excitement, the practice of giving affection, the practice of receiving affection. Now, let's also just add the obvious. Many of us rush into relationships, and one surefire way to make this speed up and to confuse us as far as the quality of the bond, the depth of the bond, whether or not we're even bonding at all, is to introduce rather immediate sexual relating. The rush of hormones, the ability for the mind and the attachment system to create an attachment bond rather quickly when we start behaving sexually. So someone we just met, they just met us, we're all strangers, we have no foundation, we have no history, we do not know our compatibility, we do not know our values, we do not know our shortcomings, we have not practiced revealing, taking risks to share the parts of ourselves that we struggle to reveal. We have not had time to do any of that. But instead, what we're going to do is appear as if we're just completely head over heels. And like many people who've done this throughout the ages, we believe, we trick ourselves into believing that this actually is more reliable than it is. And this is where the great fall happens. There's no foundation. It can't sustain itself. It's almost inevitable. Now, you could prove me wrong. I'm sure there's, a certain percentage of people who they have participated in this behavior, and there had been some transition that had moved into a different chapter of relating and created a relationship that did have a foundation. But for a good percentage of us, and I don't know what the numbers are, but a good percentage of us, this is not going to work in our favor. It is going to be a burst of bright excitement. It is going to be a distraction. It is going to give us an overwhelming feeling of being alive. It's just going to be exciting. We're really getting off on the excitement. And similar to like love addiction as being a compulsive behavior, a process addiction where we're repeating, pursuing, seeking, and this is creating this imbalance. There's a lot of imbalance here. And ultimately what it's doing is it's harming us because we're not paying attention to our boundaries. We're making promises of commitments that we have no context for making those or to really fully know the contract that we're signing. And since I said the word contract, let's just even be literal with that. Some of us get married. Well, we've only known each other for a week, but we are so blissed out on each other that we definitely must go to Vegas and get married. And, we call this romantic. We call this true love. And many of us get burned because this whole behavior can't sustain itself because it's not grounded in any shared reality. We're projecting a hope, an aspiration, a promise, a desire, that we want relationship to be this big, amazing thing that finally gives us meaning, finally gives us direction, finally gives us a sense of safety, finally helps us feel like we belong and that we matter. And we are projecting all of this onto the other person that we don't know, who's a stranger. And we are convincing ourselves that we're going to get all of these things in the next 48 hours, or in the next 3 weeks, or in the next 2 months. And there's this idea that if we just keep it going and keep it, it's almost like we're on a treadmill. And that's true of any compulsive addictive behavior. It's that you got to keep it going. And more and more and more. And we're setting ourselves up for a big fall. And again, if we really deep down believe that we're not worthy of relationship, or that we don't have the skill to make it work, or we really don't trust, or we're not going to sustain this level of vulnerability. The honesty that's involved in authentic vulnerability sometimes can feel warm and blissful and bring a sense of contentment and safety. But oftentimes, to really reveal yourself in the exchange of intimacy, to drop your guard, to drop the mask, to drop the wall, in a way that you do it as a slow disclosure. None of this rushing, instant love bombing yourself. But if you would really practice allowing yourself to show up, allowing yourself to be seen, finding a partner, a new person that you're dating, who has the skill also to see you, has the skill to slow down, who wants to know you, and that you do the same for them. And when we drop our guard, and when we practice this kind of honest, authentic vulnerability, it oftentimes doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel bad, but it is edgy, and it is scary, and it's more like, we're on a roller coaster and the floor just dropped out, or there's this not all the time. It doesn't have to be like jumping out of an airplane, but there's these moments where they're small increments of moving closer, and they are slow moments of revealing ourselves, a slower disclosure. We don't need to know everything about each other in 48 hours. We don't need to know everything about each other in 2 weeks. We do not need to share our deepest, darkest fears immediately. But instead, we would slowly over time reveal who we are, this disclosure of waiting for the other person to invite us, who wants to know us, and that we would do the same to them and invite them to share a piece, a part, a vignette of a much larger, bigger story, of a much larger, bigger chapter, that over time we start to see from many different perspectives, and we get to see the layers, and we get to learn about the process, and simultaneously we get to hear about the aspects of the struggles of life in such a way that enrich how we know each other, that sadness and tragedy and grief and hurt and disappointment are not things that we're sharing very quickly in order to cling to each other as a kind of protection from the very thing that we're sharing. But through the slow disclosure, through the many, many conversations, it implies repeated getting together and learning about each other. So if we rush all of this, it's a very high percentage, it's a very high probability that we're not going to be able to sustain this, or the thing that we're creating, this momentum, will not be able to sustain itself, and it will implode. And then we ultimately will feel the crushing pain and grief of our fantasy projection, all of that hope. And we also oftentimes can become disgusted with ourselves, disgusted with the whole situation, and even repulsed by the other person, because in that moment, we are looking directly at someone. We have no idea who they are. We say, who are you? You're not the person that I've been pretending you are for the last 3 weeks. You're not the person that I've been pretending to fall in love with for the last 3 months. I've fallen in love with my projection and idea of who I think you are and who I want you to be. And now that I realize I do not know you at all, and now that I see you without the projection, I see you without your mask, I see us without this game playing and this pseudo intimacy. And of course, I don't know if I'm attracted to you because we have not been honest with each other. We've rushed a connection and forced a connection in order to be filled up with the excitement of going through the motions of falling in love. And in fact, what we're doing is the opposite of inviting a relationship. We're greatly increasing the odds of not sharing who we are. We're using these behaviors to distract from revealing ourselves. We can't handle the gray area, the not knowing, the uncertainty of not having a commitment of where this is going. And to manage our attachment distress, we want to force and speed up and accelerate and amplify the affection, attraction, attention that we're getting and that we're giving. Because if we don't do that, we feel very anxious. We have a lot of attachment distress around where is this going? Where is this going? I don't, this is really risky. I don't feel safe here. And when we don't feel safe, what we're trying to do is step around our fear and pretend to override that we're closer than we actually are. When we're doing this, we don't have boundaries. When we're doing this, we do not know how to pause. When we're doing this, we do not know how to slow down. The thought of taking a weekend off, the thought of not seeing each other every 3 days, the thought of not calling as frequently, the thought of making friends with the thought of making plans with other people doesn't even occur to us. During this period of time, we're just completely oriented and we got to max out our time. Well, that's keeping this whole thing going. And if we wanted to really confront ourselves, how we're distorting reality and projecting a lot of fantasy onto the situation, imagining, heightening, amplifying the feelings that we're feeling, and projecting this onto the other person as well, if we just stopped and paused and took a break, it might allow us to get a little bit of perspective and to not rush this relationship. Those of us with attachment, a history of attachment injuries, where if it's in the context of family relating and childhood with a parent who in some ways was emotionally absent and not available, was there but not really there, and this emotional absence really limited how the parent responded with curiosity and limited how the parent saw you. So that you've developed this skill to not be seen. And you've developed the skill to overcompensate with one-sided relating, where you'll make it all up. You'll make up that you're closer with your parent than you actually are, because we need to do that to survive. You'll make up. You'll play with reality a little bit that it's not really that hurtful that you're ignored. And or we put it in the context that, well, this is just what our family does. This, for us, ignoring each other emotionally, that's normal. And I'm okay with it because it's normal. And so we take this skill, this one-sided relating, and it's a really great skill to have if you want to distort reality not pay attention to red flags, and you want to love bomb yourself so that you maximize the intensity of what it means to get to know someone and fall in love. And this one-sided relating means that you're not paying attention that the other person might not be participating and reciprocating in a mutual way. But in fact, you're doing this whole performance for yourself so that you can feel a certain way. And it's really a one-person show. It's not, this is not a shared dialogue. You're pretty much in a monologue with yourself. You're scripting a relationship that's not really there. The same way, historically, if it is true of your family, with your parents, the parent-child experience, the parent was there, but not really there. And so that's what we're doing in this love bombing experience. We don't need the other person to actually reciprocate. We don't need the other person to show up with a certain degree of intensity and availability, because we will fill in the gaps. We're very sophisticated at imagining a relationship that's there, that's not really there. And this is why we call it a fantasy relationship. This is why it falls under the heading of love addiction, because we just can keep this thing going and going and going. And it is so not grounded in any authentic exchange of emotional responsiveness, and it is not grounded in any actual shared reality. It is a one-sided reality. What happens is that we're really trying to invite a merging and not separating, and that we find this enmeshment, this being consumed, and this links to this love addiction idea of compulsion. We're really compulsively seeking, persistently seeking to feel consumed, which we could call, like, we could say your ego boundaries dissolve, and you sort of merge together. And the idea is that we all do this, and there's an incredible sense of that's the word oneness, where I'm not a fan of that idea, but at face value, the goodness of that is it can feel like an incredible sense of, I don't have to do everything myself. It's just really nice to feel a shared connection in a way that we have this merged sense of oneness. There's you, there's me, together. Now we're a we, and we share this we space. But relationships and the psyche and ego boundaries and a need for differentiation, a need to individuate and to spend time outside of the we. And so actually, healthy relationship is we do come together and connect, and we have those incredibly intimate moments where we soften our guardedness, and we soften our walls, and we soften the mask. We might even put the mask down. And we practice that edgy, scary intimacy, revealing ourselves and feeling a little nervous. So I don't know if you're really ready to handle this part of me, but I'm going to show you anyway. And I hear that you're nervous, that whether or not I can handle you, really seeing you for who you are. And we're just practicing over and over and doing over and over to do this. But when we're approaching this as this love bombing ourselves, and we're not giving ourselves the slow disclosure, we're really trying to maximize and stay at that place of merged enmeshment. Because we fear the separation, and then it's in the place of that separation where there's also an emptiness, there's an absence. That's our aloneness. And we're really looking for a relationship to protect us from those difficult feelings. And that becomes too tall of an order. I know at face value it sounds reasonable, But I'm not talking about the reasonable application. I'm talking about when we expect a partner to manage the feelings, the emotions, the intensity of life that we can't manage. And that we're really becoming codependent on codependent on the other person to help us manage our own nervous system dysregulation, to have the other person protect us from ever feeling alone again, from ever feeling disappointment again, from ever feeling those abandonment feelings again. And so we're not allowing the other person to be an individual. Instead, we're employing them to hold our woundedness, to hold the aspects of self that we've yet to integrate, to hold the part of ourselves that believes we're unlovable, that we don't matter, that we're not good enough, and that we're expecting the other person to prove it differently, and to be the corrective experience, not because we also are co-creating a practice of secure connection, but more in a codependent sense of dependency, really wanting the other person to shield us and buffer us from that which we cannot handle on our own. And many of us then are showing up, creating more of a parent-child dynamic, where we might show up in certain ways at times, behaving as the parent for this new person we just met, and they get to be in the child role, or that role reverses and you yourself, you show up as a child and you want to be loved like a parent who's taking care of you. You want to be loved like a child with a parent who's taking care of you. And we're going to intensify this trying to get unmet needs met quickly, instantly from a stranger that we don't know, by forcing a closeness that doesn't exist. And we are manufacturing it. That's why I call it the pseudo intimacy. We're manufacturing it because we're still frightened of the reality is there's no relationship here. We're both strangers. And it's very, very scary to still be in the gray area of waiting. So, in my opinion, and it just depends on how you feel about stages and chapters of relationship, but of working with clients and also in my own personal life, I really believe the early stages of just meeting someone are some of the most stressful for those of us with attachment injuries, because it is complete groundlessness and we have no rhythm of connecting. We have no frequency of how often we're going to come together. It's too early and too soon to really make demands of the other person and say, hey, by the way, I have this thing called an attachment injury, and it would be really helpful if we had some regular checking in with each other. It really would help calm my nervous system. And I also know that there's this, because of this attachment injuries, we need to be intentional about taking breaks and making sure that we support our individuality. I mean, that's just too much to put on someone when you say, hey, you want to go to a movie on Thursday night and, maybe afterwards we'll, get some dessert. It's just a bit much. So we hold back, we keep it to ourselves. And we don't say, oh, by the way, let me tell you my history of attachment injuries and how I have some symptoms of attachment trauma. Again, we hold that in, understandably, because it would be too much to share that. But what happens is that in the early stages of dating and just getting to know this person, we're very much white-knuckling the fear of where is this going, and it does create a lot of attachment distress and anxiety. So, the whole point of this video, how do we handle this attachment distress and anxiety? We rush a commitment and we flood it and we fill it in very quickly with being overly affectionate, overly encouraging, overly loving, and pretend that we're already in a relationship when in fact we aren't. And what we're doing is pulling the wool over our eyes. That's the dishonest part. We're distorting reality by not being honest with ourselves that we got to take it slow and we don't know where this is going. It does stir up fear, and it's very possible we're going to get hurt. We try to sidestep, step over, avoid potential hurt by forcing a closeness that's not there. A couple other things to explore here is that this is usually unsustainable, that we cannot show up with this level of attention and intensity of attentiveness on a regular basis. We just don't have that much energy. We have to go to work, take care of the kids, pick up the dry cleaning, and live your life. And over time, we're not going to be able to sustain this. Some of us do this, love bomb ourselves, appear to be closer than we actually are, because we don't have the skills to engage, to talk, to reveal ourselves. Our interpersonal skills are actually lacking. Our communication skills are lacking. Our ability to stay present and bear witness is lacking. Our ability to notice when there's a bid for connection and to respond emotionally, the emotional responsiveness, so that it would create a shared experience of emotional attunement. We're a little rusty, or we don't really quite know how to do that. And we want to appear to be more sophisticated than we are. We want to appear that we are developmentally able to be in a relationship, when in fact, like many of us, we have our challenges. But we try to, we can substitute this love bombing behavior in order to cover up that we don't have certain necessary skills to actually build a foundation of secure attachment anyway. And many of us would not enter relationships saying, oh, by the way, guess what? I don't have the necessary skills to create a secure attachment. Do you want to go out next Thursday? We know that, a lot of times the other person we're asking will say, no, thanks, not interested. So instead, we might try to cover that up, and we distract ourselves and the other person with more of this love bombing behavior. Let's end the video. Let's have empathy for you, empathy for me, compassion. What is the core driving this besides attachment, injuries? The flip of that, or the goodness, the thread of goodness here, is we all want to love and be loved. We want a shot at relationship. And if you don't get really very many opportunities, it's very easy to want to accelerate, go all in, speed it up, really make this, really try to hang on to it, because you know what it's like to have years and years of struggle, challenge, of relationships not working out, and you know what it's like to have rather long periods of time of never meeting anyone, feeling alone, feeling lonely. And so instead of diminishing or just judging this as these dishonest behaviors of pulling the wool over our eyes, of distorting reality, it's also being driven and or informed by a place of, well, wouldn't it be nice to finally find kind of secure relationship that is exciting and fills us up with love, and that we can love the other person, and that there's some sense of permanence and it's reliable. Everybody wants to be loved. So I think that also, as detrimental and hurtful as this can be to any kind of longevity of actually creating a relationship that has potential to continue on, at the core, we're doing this also because we want to be loved. If this video is helpful, if you get benefit from it, my effort and bringing in experience to talk about these things, will you please share this video with others? You can take the link and put it on other social media sites. Perhaps you know the algorithm will favor my channel and favor this video. The more people who find it through links and share it and leave a comment, subscribe, all that. We've heard it 800 times on these videos. To subscribe, comment, hit the like button. And when you do, it helps me, and also in a bigger sense, really helps spread the word that many of us need this information and need to reflect on our behaviors and how we show up in relationship, especially since we inherited through a history of attachment injuries, certain skills and behaviors that are just not that helpful. So thank you for watching. More videos on the way, and I will see you next time.